Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are tackling two words that scare a lot of backend developers, Kubernetes and EKS. Here is my promise, if you have never touched either one, if they have always felt like this wall of jargon that everyone else somehow understands, by the end of this video, it is going to click. We start from absolute zero, we use everyday analogies and we build up piece by piece. Part 1 is Kubernetes, the foundation. Part 2 is EKS, which is really the main event and it is where most of your real world work will happen. So let's get into it. Quick roadmap so you always know where we are. First, the problem. Why software used to break the moment you moved it from your laptop to a real server? Then what Kubernetes actually is and the clever brain and muscle design behind it. Then the handful of building blocks you will hear about every single day, pods, deployments, and services. And then we spend the back half of the video on Amazon EKS, who runs what, how networking and security work, how it scales and what it costs. We finish by following one single user click all the way through the system. Don't worry about memorizing anything, just follow the story. Now let's start with a problem every developer has lived through, but it works on my machine. Picture this, on your laptop, your app runs perfectly, you have got the right version of Java, the right database, maybe the right Redis, all your settings tuned just so, which is very beautiful, right? Then you ship it to the production server and it crashes. Now why is that? Because that server has a slightly older Java, a different database version and no Redis, and maybe a different config. The root cause is simple. Your app and everything it depends on, the language, the libraries, the settings, they live in different places on every machine. So when you move the app, its whole environment doesn't come along for the ride. You are basically shipping a fish without the water. Now what is the fix? The fix for this is the container. And the easiest way to understand a container is a real shipping container, the big metal box on cargo ships. Think about how brilliant those are. It doesn't matter what is inside, maybe clothes, maybe food, or maybe machinery. Every ship, every truck, every crane in the world handles that box the exact same way because the box itself is standard. A software container is similar idea. It is a standardized box that holds your app plus its entire environment. The code, the runtime like Java 21, all the libraries and the config, all sealed together. So now, because the app and its world travel together inside one sealed box, it runs identically everywhere. Your laptop, a test server, production, same box, same behavior, and works on my machine finally becomes works on every machine. Now there is a new problem. So containers solved our first problem, and there is always a but, they create a brand new one. In real production system, you don't have one container, you have dozens, sometimes hundreds, spread across many servers. And now you have to actually manage all of them by hand. Look at these questions. One container crashes at 3 in the morning. Who is awake to restart it? Traffic suddenly spikes 10 times. Who adds more copies fast? A whole server dies. Who moves its containers somewhere healthy? You ship a new version. Who updates everything without taking the site down? And with hundreds of containers, how do they even find each other to talk? Now, doing all of this manually is completely impossible. You would need a small army of engineers who never sleep, so we need something to manage the containers for us. Now, that something is Kubernetes. Here is the analogy I want you to hold on to. Think of an orchestra conductor. 50 musicians cannot stay in sync on their own. The container does not play a single note themselves. Their whole job is to make sure everyone starts on time, stays in tempo, and if one musician stops, the music keeps going anyway. Kubernetes is that conductor for your containers. You tell it what you want and it makes it happen. And crucially, it keeps it that way. Automatically, it does 5 things. It runs the right number of copies, it heals, restarts, or replaces anything that dies, it scales copies up and down with traffic, it connects containers with stable addresses so they can talk, and it updates to new versions with no downtime, and that is the whole picture. Everything else is just detail. Now, how does Kubernetes pull this off? Every Kubernetes cluster just means the whole group of machines working together. Now, every Kubernetes cluster is split into 2 halves. On the left, we have control plane. I want you to think of it as the brain. It makes all of the decisions, it holds the plan, but it never actually runs your app itself. On the right, we have worker nodes. These are the muscle. They are the real servers that actually run your containers. The brain sends instructions to the muscle. Run this here, restart that, add 2 more copies over there, stuff like that. The muscle does the physical work and reports back. Brain decides, muscle executes. Keep that split in your head. It comes back over and over, especially when we get to EKS. Now let's peek inside the brain, the control plane. 4 parts. You don't need to memorize these, just get the vibe of each. The API server is the front door. Everything, you, your tools, even the worker nodes, talk to the cluster only through this door. Nothing bypasses it. etcd. Think of it as the cluster's memory. It is a database that stores the full picture, like what you want running and what is actually running right now. The scheduler is the matchmaker. Every time a new container needs to run, the scheduler decides which worker node it should go on, based on which nodes have room and what the rules are. And finally, the controllers are the watchdogs. They constantly compare what you asked for against what actually exists and try to quietly fix any gap. Hold that watchdog idea because it is secretly the most important concept in all of Kubernetes, and we will come back to it. Now, what is inside a worker node? The muscle, a single worker node that is your real server. And it is where your containers actually live, wrapped in pods. We will define pods properly in a second, but consider node right now. Each node has a little local staff, which is your 3 helpers. The kubelet, the kubeproxy, and the runtime. Kubelet is the on-site foreman. It takes order from the brain and makes sure the pods on this node are actually running. Kubeproxy is the switchboard. It handles networking on the node, routing traffic to the right pod. And the runtime, often something called containered. It is the engine that literally starts and stops the containers. So, the brain decides what should run and where. The foreman on each node makes it actually happen, and that is the full loop between these 2 halves. Now, let's talk about pod. So, building block number 1, and it is the one you will say out loud the most, the pod. A pod is the smallest thing Kubernetes will run for you. Here is slightly surprising part. Kubernetes never runs a bare container directly. It always wraps it in a pod. Usually it is a one-to-one thing. One pod holds one container, which is one running copy of your app. Sometimes a pod has a little helper container alongside the main one, and they share networking and storage, but that is an edge case for now. 3 things to remember here. 1. It is the smallest unit you deploy. 2. Pods are disposable by design. They get created and destroyed all the time. 3. You almost never create pods by hand. Something else creates them for you, and that something is our next building block. Now, that something is the deployment, and this is where the magic of self-healing shows up. So here is how it works. You don't manually start pods, instead you declare a wish. I want 3 copies of my app running, and that's it. Kubernetes reads that and makes sure exactly 3 pods are alive always. Now watch what happens when something breaks. One of those pods suddenly dies, maybe the server hiccuped, maybe the app crashed. In old school operations, an alert fires and a human gets paced. With Kubernetes, it notices instantly that you have got 2 pods but you asked for 3. So it just creates a new one within seconds. Nobody woke up, nobody got paced, the system quietly healed itself. And that is not a premium feature to buy. That is how Kubernetes works by default. Now, this brings us to the most important idea in the entire video. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Think about a thermostat on your wall. You set it to 22 degrees, that is your desired state. The thermostat then constantly checks the actual room temperature and turns the heating on or off until the room matches what you asked for. And it never stops checking forever. Kubernetes works in the exact same way. You declare a desired state, 3 pods, this version, this config, etc. And Kubernetes runs a non-stop loop which we call reconciliation. It compares what you desired against what actually exists. If they don't match, it acts to close the gap. Then it repeats like forever. And that is it. This is the secret. Everything Kubernetes does, healing, scaling, updating, is just this one loop running over and over again. Desired versus actual and act to match. That's it. Now, building block number 3, the service. This one solves a sneaky problem. Remember I said pods are disposable, they die and get replaced constantly. Well, here is the catch. Every time a new pod is born, it gets a brand new network address. So if you're another part of the app trying to reach it, you are chasing a moving target. The address you had a minute ago is already gone. The service fixes this by being a stable front door. It has one fixed name that never changes. Anything that wants to reach your app just talks to that service name, and behind the scenes, the service keeps track of which pods are currently alive and spreads the traffic across them. And that is your load balancing for free. So instead of chasing individual pods around, you talk to one steady address and the service handles the rest. Now let's quickly round out the vocabulary with 4 more words you will bump into. Nice and fast. Namespace. Think of these as folders for your cluster. They keep your dev, staging and production stuff tidy and separated so things don't collide. Config map. This is where you keep your non-secret settings outside your container image. Think of it like URLs, feature flags, tuning values, etc. Change the setting without building or rebuilding the app. Now secret. Same idea but for the sensitive stuff like your passwords, API keys, tokens. So keep them separate and protected. Finally, we have ingress. This is the smart doorway that lets traffic from the outside internet find its way to the right service inside your cluster. And that is your core vocabulary. You now speak enough Kubernetes to be really dangerous. Now let's freeze the whole of part 1 that we just talked about into one picture, because we are about to build EKS right on top of it. Here is your cluster. On the left, the control plane, the brain with its API server, etcd, scheduler, and controllers. On your right, your worker nodes, the muscle, each running pods with services, giving those pods stable addresses. And the one sentence that ties it all together, you declare the desired state and the control plane works non-stop to make the worker nodes match it and keep them matching. That is your Kubernetes. Take a breath, because now we have to get to the part you actually came for, which is EKS. Everything we just learned is the foundation. Now we put it to work in the real world on AWS. Because here is the thing. Nobody tells beginners upfront Kubernetes is incredibly powerful, but running it yourself is genuinely complex. EKS is AWS stepping in to handle the hardest part for you. For the rest of this video, that is our focus. Let's exactly see what AWS takes off your plate and why that matters so much. Who runs the control plane? Let's expose the catch. Go back to that control plane, the brain. In everything we have drawn so far, I quietly skipped one question. Who actually runs the brain? Because it doesn't run itself. If you do plain Kubernetes on your own, you are on the hook for all of this. You have to take up etcd correctly. If you get that database wrong, and you can lose the entire cluster. So you have to make the brain highly available, running copies across multiple data centers, so one failure does not take everything down. You have to patch and upgrade it constantly to stay secure. You have to back it up and actually test that you can restore it. You have to monitor it and around the clock, and be the person who gets paced at 3 a.m. when it actually misbehaves, and then you do all of it again for every new environment. So what did we understand? That this work is really heavy, it's boring, it's high stakes, and none of it is actually your real product. So your users does not care that you hand patched etcd, they care that the app works. So here is the deal EKS offers you. EKS stands for Elastic Kubernetes Service, and in one line it's managed Kubernetes. Now managed word here is very important, right? So AWS runs that entire control plane for you. They set it up, they make it highly available across data centers, they patch it, they monitor it, and they back it up. All that painful brain babysitting we just listed, gone. You just get a healthy, ready to use Kubernetes, and this is what I meant by managed Kubernetes. Now I want to be really clear about three things this buys for you. First, the real Kubernetes. Standard unmodified. Your skills, your YAML files, your knowledge all transfer anywhere. You are not learning some weird AWS only fork. Second, no control plane babysitting, no etcd, no brain upgrades, no 3 a.m. pages for the thing AWS now owns. Third, it's AWS native, so it plugs directly into AWS networking, security, storage, and scaling, which we are about to explore. Now, who does what? This is the most important slide in part 2, so let's take it slow. The number one confusion with EKS is who is responsible for what, and here is the clear answer. On the left we have AWS, which manages the control plane, the brain. That means API server and etcd, keeping copies healthy across 3 availability zones, and all version patching and upgrades, backups and recovery, and 24/7 monitoring, so you don't touch any of it. But on the right, you manage the data plane, the muscle, plus your actual apps, that is your worker nodes. Though as we will see, you can even let AWS run those as well. Your pods and images, how much to scale, your app level networking rules, and your access and permissions. Here is the one sentence to memorize for the rest of your career. AWS owns the brain, you own the muscle and the application. Everything else about EKS is just a footnote to that split. Now let's see that split as one real diagram. This is what an actual EKS cluster looks like. Up top in green we have the AWS managed control plane. Notice it is spread across 3 availability zones, 3 separate data centers, each with a copy of the API and etcd. That is AWS giving you high availability automatically, so no single data center failure can take your brain down. And you never touch this layer, it just runs. Down below in blue is your VPC, your own private network inside your AWS account. That is your territory. Here your worker nodes lives, and inside them your pods running your application. The control plane up top manages the worker nodes down here. Same brain and muscle idea from part 1, except now AWS is quietly running the entire top half for you across 3 data centers without you lifting a finger. Okay, so AWS runs the brain, but those worker nodes, the muscle, where do they come from? You have got a choice here, and it is really about how much work you want to do yourself. So we have 3 common options. Option 1, managed node groups. Again, focus on the managed word here. You pick the server type and size, how powerful, how big, and AWS provisions and maintains those servers as a group. This gives you the most control. Option 2, Fargate. This is serverless. There are literally no servers for you to see or manage. Each pod just runs on capacity that AWS spins up on demand, zero node operations. Option 3, and the newer one, EKS Auto Mode. Here AWS looks at your pods and automatically picks the right servers, scales them, patches them, and right sizes them for you. It is the hands off. Just run it for me by default. Same cluster, 3 ways to get your muscle. Let's compare them directly. Now here is the side by side, read it left to right. Okay, so do you manage nodes with node groups? Yes. Some. You pick the type and size. With Fargate and Auto Mode, none. AWS handles it automatically. Now who scales them? Node groups. You configure the scaling rules. Fargate, AWS, per pod. Auto Mode, AWS, fully automatically. Control level. Node groups gives you the highest control. Fargate the lowest. Auto Mode is low control but flexible. A nice middle ground, right? Best for node groups suit steady custom fleets where you want to tune everything. Fargate suits spiky or simple apps. Auto Mode is for when you just want it handled. My honest rule of thumb, down at the bottom. If you are starting out, reach for Auto Mode or Fargate for simplicity. Move to node groups later when you actually need that tighter control. Don't take on node management before you have to. Now let's talk networking. How a pod gets a real address on AWS. This is one of my favorite EKS touches. In plain Kubernetes, pods live on their own private internal network, kind of walled off from everything else. On EKS, there is a plugin called the VPC CNI. And here is what it does. It gives every single pod a real IP address from your VPC, your actual AWS network. So in the diagram, if you can see that each pod gets an address like 10.0. something straight out of your network's range. That sounds like a small detail, but it is a big deal. It means each pod is a first-class citizen on your AWS network. It can talk directly and naturally to your database in RDS, to S3, to other AWS services. So no awkward translation layers, no gymnastic. Your pods and your AWS services are all on the same network, speaking the same language. Now you might be wondering about load balancing. So getting traffic in from the outside internet, a user out there types your web address. How does that reach a pod buried in your cluster? Traffic first comes in from internet users, hits an AWS load balancer, which passes it to your service. Remember the stable front door from part 1, and the service routes it to one of your healthy pods. And because you usually run several copies, the load spreads across all of them. Now the nice part, you don't wire up that load balancer by hand. There is a piece called AWS Load Balancer Controller that watches your cluster, and the moment you expose an app, it automatically creates a real AWS load balancer for you, an ALB or NLB. You just declare, I want this app reachable, and the plumbing happens. That is the EKS pattern over and over. You declare intent, AWS builds the real infrastructure. Now let's talk security, specifically how a pod safely talks to AWS. This matters, so stay with me. Here is the problem. Say a pod needs to read from S3 or your database. The tempting wrong way is to paste your AWS access keys right into the app. Please don't, because if that app ever leaks, a bug, a breach, or a public repository, an attacker now has your keys and they have got the run of your account. The EKS way is much better. No stored keys at all. Instead, each pod is automatically handed a temporary identity. You map a pod to an IAM role, and that is AWS permission system. And that role grants exactly the permission the pod needs, nothing more. The result: temporary credentials, least privilege access, and they rotate automatically. There is simply no long-lived secret sitting there to steal. The feature or the features that do this are called IRSA and EKS pod identity. You will see those names, but the idea is the thing. Identity instead of passwords. Two more things EKS wires up for you: storage and scaling. Quick tour of both. Storage first. We said pods are disposable, right? But some data absolutely must survive a restart. Databases, user uploads, that kind of a thing. So EKS uses CSI drivers that let a pod claim real AWS storage. Now here we have two flavors. EBS, which is like a fast personal disk attached to one pod, and EFS, which is shared files that many pods can use together. The key point: that storage outlives the pod. So the pod can die and restart, but your data is still lives safely there. Scaling. Two layers scale automatically when traffic rises. The HPA, which is horizontal pod autoscaler, adds more pod copies. But those new pods need somewhere to run, so Carpenter adds more servers to fit them. And when the rush passes, both scale back down. Scale up for the crowd, scale down to save money. Automatic on both ends. Alright, let's reward all this learning by following one single user click all the way through using each and every piece we have built. So this is where it all connects. Step 1, a user opens your app. Step 2, Route 53 AWS DNS figures out the address of your system. Step 3, the request lands on your load balancer ALB. Step 4, the ALB hands it to your service, which picks a healthy pod. Step 5, your code runs inside that pod and does the work. And if that code needs data, the pod uses its pod identity, that secure keyless identity from a moment ago, to reach RDS or S3 over your VPC network. Then the response travels the exact same path back out to the user. And that is it. That is every single layer we have covered. Nodes, pods, services, load balancers, networking, identity, all working together as one system to answer one click. Now let's talk money, because what does this actually cost is a fair question, and it is simpler than people fear. EKS pricing is basically two parts. Part 1, the control plane fee. It is a flat 10 cents per hour per cluster, roughly $73 a month. And here is the nice bit, it's flat. Whether you run one pod or 1,000, that fee for the managed plane does not change. Part 2, the compute you actually use. The nodes running your pods, whether that is EC2, Fargate or auto mode, plus storage and data transfer. This part scales with your workload, and honestly, it is usually the bigger chunk of the bill. You pay for what your app consumes. So, one point worth knowing: keep your cluster on a current Kubernetes version. If you let it fall behind into what AWS calls extended support, that flat control plane fee jumps 6 times, from 10 cents to 60 cents an hour. That is roughly $73 a month, turning into $438 per month. So just upgrade on time and you avoid the whole surprise. Now let me be the honest friend for a second, because not everything should run on EKS, and I would be doing you a disservice if I pretended otherwise. Reach for EKS when these conditions are true. Your team already knows Kubernetes, you want to stay portable, maybe even multi-cloud, you are running many services or many teams, you depend on the huge ecosystem of Kubernetes tools, or you are operating at real scale. In those cases, EKS is fantastic and that little control plane fee is nothing. But maybe skip it when you have got one small simple app, nobody on the team actually knows Kubernetes yet. You want the absolute least operational overhead. You don't need any Kubernetes specific tooling, or a simple AWS option like ECS would do the job just fine. EKS is a brilliant default for Kubernetes teams. It's not an automatic yes for every application. Choosing the right tool is a senior move, and now you can make that call with your eyes open. So now let's do a quick full recap. Containers pack your app and its environment together so it runs the same everywhere. Kubernetes is the manager that runs, heals, scales, and connects those containers. Its design is brain plus muscle. The control plane decides, the worker nodes run your pods. The daily words. A pod is one running copy. A deployment keeps n copies alive. A service is a stable address. EKS is AWS running the control plane for you, real managed Kubernetes. You still own the muscle. You choose node groups, Fargate or auto mode, and your application. EKS gives you AWS native plumbing, real network IPs for pods, automatic load balancers, secure pod identity, real storage, and auto scaling. And cost is 10 cents an hour per cluster plus the compute you use. So just upgrade on time. If you followed all of that, you genuinely understand Kubernetes and EKS now, and that is not a small thing. So that is the Kubernetes and EKS from zero all the way to the full picture. If this is the video that finally made EKS click for you, do me a favor and hit subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel and it tells me to make more videos like this. Drop a comment telling me which part you want me to go deeper on, networking, security, scaling, or maybe anything else. I read them all. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.